The pounding on my door came just as the sun was breaking over the ridge. It wasn't a neighbor dropping by with coffee or a delivery truck that had gotten lost. This was something else. Heavy fists, boots on gravel, and the metallic scrape of something against the wood. I froze halfway down the hallway, staring at the front door through the slats of my blinds. 4 men stood on my porch, their broad shoulders blocking out the light, their faces shadowed by caps that bore the letters HOA Enforcement. I knew right away it was a farce. The neighborhood association had no armed patrol, no enforcement unit, no reason to send a squad of strangers to my mountain cabin. The biggest violation they'd ever cited in these hills was a man who painted his barn purple, and yet here they were, spread in a semicircle, the kind of tactical spacing that screamed rehearsal. One of them barked through the door, "Mr. Carter, you need to open up. Mandatory property inspection."
Compliance check. I almost laughed. Mandatory inspection at 6:30 in the morning? But the humor dissolved when the doorknob rattled and I saw the crowbar edge testing the frame. My hands tightened. 15 years as a firefighter hadn't made me a soldier, but I'd wrestled men twice my size out of burning buildings, and I wasn't about to let a crew of imposters invade my home. I threw the door open before the crowbar could pry it loose. The leader, a thick-set man with a laminated badge clipped to his vest, tried to shoulder inside. I caught his wrist, spun him around, and slammed him chest first against the post. The crack of surprise from his buddies gave me the second I needed. Another swung, clumsy and wild. I ducked, rammed my shoulder into his ribs, and sent him sprawling over the porch steps. The other 2 wavered, unsure, then bolted toward the idling van at the end of my drive. "Tell your boss this isn't her playground," I called after them, breathing hard. The van fishtailed in the gravel and roared away, leaving the leader groaning where I'd pinned him. When I finally let him go, he stumbled off without another word. But what stuck in my mind wasn't his fake badge. It was how they knew exactly when I'd be home alone, how they came prepared with tools and uniforms. This wasn't improvisation. Someone had orchestrated it. I didn't have to wonder long. The very next morning, Evelyn Brooks herself appeared on my porch. She carried a wicker basket of muffins and wore the saccharine smile of a politician on campaign day. Evelyn was the HOA president, a woman with a reputation for keeping standards high that translated to gossip, fines, and control. She was dressed too nicely for a casual visit, every hair pinned in place, eyes sharp despite the friendly tone. "Oh, Ethan, I heard about some unpleasantness yesterday," she said, handing me the basket like an offering. "Men impersonating inspectors? Terrible. But don't worry, we'll get to the bottom of it." I didn't invite her in. We sat on the porch while I kept my arms crossed. Her questions started harmless. How long I'd owned my land, whether I lived alone, whether family visited often. But the way she asked them felt like an interrogation wrapped in neighborly curiosity. "You keep such a beautiful property," she said, though her gaze slid past the view and lingered on the survey stakes along my fence. "Ever thought of what it might be worth in today's market?" The alarms in my head blared louder with every word. She knew details she shouldn't. The easement on my western lot line, the age of my well, even my morning running route. She smiled like a friend, but observed like a predator. Before I could cut her off, a sheriff's SUV pulled up, and Deputy Laura Kent stepped out, still in her night shift uniform. Laura and I had gone to school together, and she carried herself with the no-nonsense air of a woman who'd spent a decade dealing with drunks and liars. "Ma'am," she said politely, "those are some mighty personal questions for a casual visit." For the first time, Evelyn's mask cracked. The smile flattened into a line before she snapped back. "As HOA president, it's my duty to ensure compliance with community safety standards." Laura raised an eyebrow, already spotting the forged paperwork Evelyn was trying to wave around. "HOAs don't get inspection authority, and I know fake documents when I see them." Evelyn stiffened, gathered her things, and left with a parting shot. "I trust you'll attend the mandatory meeting next week, Ethan. It would be easier for everyone if you cooperate." When she was gone, Laura leaned in close. That wasn't a neighbor checking in. That was someone building a profile. I've seen it before with fraud cases. We dug into county records that night and found a disturbing trend. Veterans, retirees, and widows, anyone with valuable land but little support, were being hit with sudden HOA violations, fines, and forced sales. Evelyn's name surfaced again and again. The harassment began almost immediately. A certified letter claimed my truck was illegally parked in my own driveway. Another cited my mailbox for being 2 inches too tall. Then came the paint violation, even though my cabin had worn the same shade of cedar brown since the day it was built. Each notice carried a fine, each more absurd than the last. Evelyn herself appeared daily at the edge of my property, clipboard in hand, camera flashing like she was cataloging evidence for a trial. I started keeping my own log, time-stamped photos, recordings, notes on every encounter. My cousin Daniel, a lawyer in Nashville, confirmed my suspicions. This is property fraud, Ethan. They harass, they isolate, they bleed you until you're desperate enough to sell. When I refused to pay, the attacks escalated. My well pump line was mysteriously severed, leaving me without water for 3 days. Someone left my livestock gate open, scattering goats across the highway. My internet was cut during routine maintenance. Each event looked accidental, but the pattern was too neat. Then came the offer. Rick Hale, a broad man with tattoos peeking from his sleeves, showed up with 2 sidekicks who looked more like bouncers than contractors. They didn't bother with uniforms. Mrs. Brooks is prepared to offer you $300,000 cash for this place, he said, settling into my living room without asking. No inspections, no delays. Take it, or things get more complicated. I knew the land was worth nearly $500,000. Their offer was a stick-up dressed as business. When I laughed in his face, his smile faded. Think it over, he said. Complications can get expensive. Sure enough, 2 weeks later I was staring at liens totaling $35,000. Bogus compliance fees, emergency maintenance charges, even legal expenses that had never been incurred. Threats of foreclosure followed. Evelyn organized a community meeting where she painted me as a danger. She whispered to elderly neighbors that I had episodes, hinted to families that I was unstable. I saw fear creeping into eyes that once waved to me across the fence. That was when Daniel uncovered the truth. Evelyn Brooks wasn't just an HOA president, drunk on power. She was the owner of a shell company funneling properties to a developer called Horizon Partners. For every parcel she secured under market value, she earned a handsome commission. Veterans were her chosen targets, their land prime, and their resources thin. I fought back. I flooded social media with photos of cut lines, open gates, and fraudulent notices stamped with her signature. The response was instant. Neighbors began questioning where their dues had gone, why property values had dipped, and why so many long-timers had been forced to sell. When Rick's crew returned for a so-called final inspection, I was ready. Motion cameras lined my fence. Audio recorders captured every word. They pushed through my gate, and I gave them one last warning through the loudspeaker. You are trespassing. Leave now. They advanced anyway. The first man lunged, and a twist of his wrist had him howling on the ground. The second rushed, only to crumple when I drove a knee into his thigh. The third froze, then sprinted back to the van. The whole encounter was caught from 4 angles, time-stamped and crystal clear. Evelyn must have panicked. Days later, she staged her masterpiece, staggering into the sheriff's office with bruises she'd given herself, claiming I'd attacked her during a property dispute. She even brought witnesses who repeated the story like rehearsed lines. For a moment, the weight of it crushed me. An accusation like that could ruin a man. But she'd chosen the wrong target. My cameras had been rolling the entire time she claimed the assault occurred. The footage showed her alone, scratching her own arms, tearing her blouse, coaching her witnesses on what to say. When Laura and Daniel released the evidence, the video went viral. Evelyn's performance collapsed in real time, exposed for everyone to see. What followed was a storm. Horizon Partners' accounts were subpoenaed, revealing a multi-state scheme that had siphoned millions from veterans forced out of their land. Evelyn tried to flee,
but federal agents caught her at the airport with a suitcase full of cash and a fake passport. Rick Hale, facing decades in prison, flipped fast and handed investigators the playbook. Intimidation, sabotage, fraudulent liens, forced sales. The community that once eyed me with suspicion now turned on Evelyn with fury.
At the emergency HOA vote, she was stripped of her position.
Her allies removed, her finances frozen. The trials were long, but justice came. Evelyn was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, ordered to pay restitution to every family she had cheated. Horizon Partners collapsed, its executives hauled away. My neighbors, ashamed of how easily they'd believed her lies, came to me with apologies and casseroles, trying to patch what had been torn. For me, the real closure came months later when the county court ruled in my favor. Every false lien was erased, every violation voided. The land my father had left me stood free and clear. The cabin that had felt like a battlefield finally became a home again. Deputy Laura received a promotion for her persistence. Daniel expanded his practice, defending other veterans who had faced similar schemes. Together, we built something lasting, a foundation to protect homeowners from HOA abuse.
We called it the Carter Initiative, a place where no veteran or widow would ever again stand alone against a machine built to crush them. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings, I still hear the echo of fists on my door, the shuffle of boots on gravel. But now I smile, because I know how the story ends. They thought I was just one man on a piece of land. They forgot that one man with truth, allies, and the will to fight is enough to bring down an empire.